That day, I went to the hospital to pick up my girlfriend from work, but saw my fiancée, who had announced her death 5 years ago, lying on the hospital bed. She was lying tightly on the bed, her body covered in self-inflicted wounds. When she saw me, she immediately turned away, buried her head in the pillow, cried and said, "Kogan, please let me go." When they vaguely heard the doctors and nurses whispering about Yen, they said that she was disabled in both legs. Hot temper, feeling like a weirdo, my heart aches. Over the past 5 years, since Lu Nuyen broke up with me on the cliff, and then learned of her death, I have imagined countless times her appearing before me again. Maybe it was the image of her wearing a white dress like the summer when she was 18 years old, suddenly appearing in front of me and asking for advice. Sometimes it's the scene of her holding a bouquet of fresh flowers, smiling and confessing her love to me. I even thought about her getting married, having children, and having a happy and fulfilling life. The only thing I couldn't imagine was that she, the golden lady who was once the pride of many people, had now become weak, gloomy, ordinary, and living was more miserable than death. When I got down from the hospital elevator to get medicine for my girlfriend, I suddenly heard screams of pain. Doctors and nurses rushed over. I unconsciously watched. Just that one glance made my whole body numb. There were blood stains on the white bed sheet. The person lying on the bed was held tightly by 4 or 5 doctors. I don't know what I was trying to blink at, but that figure looked very much like that girl. But more than anyone else, I know that cannot be true. When the emergency bed hit me, I was startled awake. When I raised my head, I saw the profile face on the hospital bed. A pale face, sunken eyes, bloodless lips. The most important thing was those eyes of suffocating despair. The moment I saw that face, I suddenly lost all my strength, staggered and fell backwards, hitting the cold wall heavily. But I didn't care about the struggle and pain. I quickly stood up and staggered after the person on the emergency bed. Because that person looks a lot like my friend Yin. I stood outside the operating room, my limbs confused, not knowing where to put them. I understand better than anyone that Lu Nuyen has left me for 5 years. Her will remained under my pillow for the past year, but I couldn't leave. The mainstream Lu Nuyen raised me. My parents didn't need me since I was young, the only people I could rely on were her and my grandmother. After my grandmother passed away, I was alone. 5 years ago, we decided to get married. The wedding is planned to take place in September, which is also the month we met. But just a few days before the wedding, I received her suicide note. That thin piece of paper was brought before me, so heavy that it made me unable to stand up straight, so heavy that it made all the blood in my internal organs surrender. It was so painful that I used all my strength to scream and cry, but it was useless. I have read that letter over and over again thousands of times. I understood every word of it, but after 5 years I still couldn't accept the truth. Why can't someone Lu Nuyen, still healthy and living a good life, come back to me? We're about to get married. The surgical elevator turned off, and soon the sound of wheels rolling on the ground echoed in the quiet hallway. I tried to hold on to the surrounding wall and slowly stood up. Finally the door opened. The blood trail gradually spread on Elle following the movement of the wheel. Her face slowly appeared before my eyes. Almost immediately, I rushed forward. Lu Nuyen. I shouted her name, holding her cold hand tightly. I couldn't believe it, the person who died 5 years ago was now right in front of my eyes. The girl in front of me, small and withered, was completely different from the image of Yen in my memory. But I'm sure, in my whole life, I can never misidentify her. Lu Nuyen, it's me. It's Kogan. Look at me. Very quickly, someone came and pulled me out. They took my hands off her. I cried and shook my head, unable to let go. This is my end save. In the end, she was still put in a monitoring room and no one was allowed to visit. I stood by the window quietly looking at her through the glass, not knowing how much time had passed. Finally, the doctor allowed me to go inside. At this time, the person on the hospital bed slowly opened his eyes. Empty eyes looked forward, vague and desperate. Lu Nguyen, I could barely say her name clearly. Lu Nguyen suddenly turned around. The lifeless eyes gradually regained focus, from surprise, doubt to pain in the blink of an eye. When she saw my face clearly, she almost immediately turned away, buried her head in the pillow, and said in a choked voice, "Please don't look at me anymore, go away." My childhood was the harshest days. But thanks to Yen by my side, I have never stopped trying, not even for a second. Always try to study, try to live. I learned about her feelings when we both went to college. That day, I had just entered school when Yen stopped me right in the cafeteria. "Be my boyfriend, okay? Say something, are you dumb?" At that time, I was eating rice with my head buried in it, my cheeks bulging from being stuffed with food. She was so startled that she forgot to chew and could only stare at her with wide eyes. Lu Nguyen frowned, her tone was not very friendly. "If yes then nod, if not then forget. That's it." She raised her eyebrows and raised her fist. "You said no to me before, which hospital are you in now?" Seeing that, I quickly nodded in agreement. And so our love affair began in such a domineering way. But who would have thought that someone as arrogant as her on the outside is actually a love-crazy person, and an extremely clingy type of person, completely different from her previous cold and strict appearance. After falling in love, if I don't reply to the text messages for 1 minute, she can issue an arrest warrant to the whole school. If I don't pick up the phone in 3 minutes, she might blow up the world. The most important thing is that if you don't let them hold hands, it will cause chaos. If you don't let them hug you, it will cause even more chaos. Every day I have to be both her boyfriend and her father. It's obvious that Lu Nguyen really likes taking pictures of me. In her phone album, almost all of them are photos of me. I accidentally discovered that even before confessing, she secretly took pictures of me outside many times. Lu Nguyen is called the big sister of the gangster. Even the school dogs had to avoid her when they saw her, but someone like that is a spoiled brat. "Kogan, hug me. I'm so beautiful, don't you want to hug me?" "Kogan, honey, your beautiful girlfriend needs a kiss from you." Having loved each other for many years, Lu Nguyen became an invincible narcissist, and often casually asked me, "Hey, why did you agree with me so quickly back then? Were you captivated by my cuteness? After all, I'm young and beautiful, who could refuse?" I looked at her wearing pink leopard pajamas standing in front of the mirror, posing in all kinds of poses. I could only hold my head and sigh. Is that called confession? Obviously forcing me. "Kogan, please say one more sentence. Do you want a rebel? Let's see how I handle you." In the blink of an eye, the pink leopard pajamas flew everywhere. Lu Nguyen pressed me down on the bed. She once said that she could listen to me about anything, except breaking up, because she couldn't stand those 2 words. In the end, even if it was a couple of strong women and weak men, the first person to propose was still her. In the 5th year of our relationship, as soon as I entered the house, I saw photos of us all over the room. From the moment we first met until we fell in love, the first time we met, the first time we confessed our love, the first time we held hands, the first time we kissed. I flipped through each photo and then heard the door open. Nguyen wore a white wedding dress I had never seen before, holding her favorite bouquet of cinnamon flowers, approaching step by step. The atmosphere was so romantic, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she used a forced tone. Kogan, you're so beautiful, it won't be a loss to marry you, so marry me quickly. I looked at her bewildered. Seeing that I didn't react, Lu Nuyen scratched her head and looked down, her voice somewhat menacing. Agree now. The years of being loved by her have made me more confident. I bowed my head and asked back. What if not? Lu Nuyen let go of all pride and lowered her voice. I will beg you. Let me kiss you. I don't know what kind of amnesia you cast, but if I leave you, I really can't live. Seeing me laugh, she spoke even more enthusiastically. No matter what, I want to marry you, only marry you, Kogan. Please have mercy on me, I'm already of marriageable age, please marry me. I was also touched and hugged her tightly. So I married the person I love, and luckily that person also loves me the most in this world. We were busy preparing for the wedding like any other couple, but right before the wedding day, I received her will. I don't remember how I got through that time, a numb, lifeless zombie. All those words are too gentle. I just feel like my life has completely collapsed. Lu Nuyen, this is Kogan. But she turned her head away, refusing to look at me once. Just screaming at me to go away. As soon as I took a step forward, she immediately pulled the line and fell onto the bed. Then, leaning against the wall, he staggered, wanting to run out. Traces of blood dripped onto the floor following her trembling footsteps, but more and more. I shouted. I lost. I'm leaving, don't move anymore. I beg you, don't hurt yourself. Having finished speaking, I rushed out of the hospital room, not daring to look back. All 4 limbs are healthy, but cannot move as desired. The road is so flat, yet I stumble over and over again. In the end, I didn't even have the strength to stand up anymore. I sat on the ground, tears streaming down without knowing why. I don't understand, if she's still alive, why doesn't she come find me? I can't understand even more, the person who said she couldn't live without me, the person who couldn't bear to leave me, why did she chase me away the first time we met? Tamo So found me downstairs in the treatment area. She looked at my dirty clothes, looking at me blankly and unconscious. Frowning slightly, he asked worriedly. What happened? I slowly turned my head, looked clearly at the person in front of me, and suddenly grabbed her sleeve. Lu Nuyen is still alive. She is in this hospital, on the 3rd floor. Thinking about Lu Nuyen's emaciated appearance, tears welled up in my eyes. She's suffering so much. She hates being in the hospital, I have to take her home. That's right, I have to take her home. No one knows that the girl who is not afraid of heaven or earth is actually the shyest person. Only because she wanted to motivate me did she become so strong and resilient. As soon as I stood up, I was held tightly by Tamo So. Kogan, calm down. I pushed her hand away. I can't calm down. It's Lu Nuyen. Tamo So. That's Lu Nuyen. How do you tell me to calm down? I want to take her away, it's not good for her to live here, she has wounds all over her body. Lu Nuyen could not be discharged from the hospital. She has very serious suicidal tendencies, she will die. Tamo So's words were like a basin of cold water poured straight onto my head. I stiffened and turned around. Reason gradually returns. You are a doctor at this hospital, you already knew she was here, right? How I lived those 5 years, you know best. But she was so close to me, why didn't you tell me? I thought she was dead. Lu Nuyen disappeared for 5 years, and I'm still alive. Having been dead for the past 5 years, I almost went crazy and grabbed Tamo So and shook him hard. Suddenly, she held my hands tightly, Her eyes were bloodshot, and she screamed as if she had exhausted all her strength. That she didn't want to see him that night. After returning home, I sat on the windowsill for a long time. In that partially open closet, there was a white wedding dress. That is Lu Nguyen's wedding dress. Next to it is a red bed sheet. She carefully chose it to prepare for our wedding. On the bed sheet were printed the words "Love for Life." She was already prepared to accompany me through the rest of my life. So why did you let go halfway? I picked up the teddy bear next to me. On it was Lu Nguyen's shirt. Her breathing was still there, making me feel reassured. I unconsciously hugged it tightly, my tears gradually soaking the fabric. Lu Nguyen, this stupid head. The next morning, I went to find Tamo So and got straight to the point. Sorry Tamo So, I want to cancel the engagement. She took off her glasses, her eyes filled with blood after a sleepless night. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she just sighed, saying something. Do you want to kill Lu Nguyen? I just want to take good care of her. How can I force her to die? Tamo So signaled me not to get excited. Kogan, after Lu Nguyen disappeared, she was tortured for 2 years. Her body was full of knife cuts, bruises, burns, and even had her fingers cut off. Tamo So did not continue, but I imagine the worst. Does a beautiful person like Lu Nguyen have to go through these things? How much pain was she in? 3 years before being found, Nguyen's immune system and organ function were seriously damaged, potentially leading to kidney failure. There may even be uremia or sudden heart failure. In addition to physical damage, her spirit was also severely affected. A proud genius became a cripple. Her biological parents committed suicide because of her. Because of her, the fiancé was so miserable that he almost fell into depression and committed suicide. The physical and mental torture made her extremely painful, so painful that she just wanted to die. Every word Tamo So said was like a knife cutting into my heart. 2 years ago, Nguyen was transferred to this hospital. She begged me not to tell him. She knew he hadn't had an easy life over the years, so she felt very guilty. She didn't want him to see her most miserable appearance. I'm afraid he will pity her, feel sorry for her. She is even more afraid that she will ruin her perfect image in his heart. She just wants him to remember a radiant Lu Nguyen, always smiling confidently, and then to see him live well. Having said that, Tamo So took me to the rehabilitation department. In the intensive care room, I saw Lu Nguyen. Her whole body was filled with tubes and had to rely on countless machines to maintain her life. I couldn't believe it. I covered my mouth with my hand. Apparently, yesterday, because of his appearance, she was so agitated that she hurt herself, used a shard to cut an artery and then locked herself in the bathroom. It wasn't until blood was all over the floor that someone discovered it. She was truly determined to die. At that moment, I completely lost the ability to think and act, and could only lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Tamo So stood there, put his hands in his pockets, and coldly said, Kogan, if you really love her, stay away from her, don't provoke her anymore. Nguyen will really die. Since hearing about your engagement, she has somewhat relieved her guilt. If you cancel the engagement now, she will blame all the mistakes on herself and will use the most cruel ways to punish herself. I don't know how many times I dreamed of Lu Nguyen lying there, in front of me, lifeless. It was a nightmare that haunted my whole life. Before leaving, Tamo So turned back, Kogan, if you want to cancel the marriage, I have no opinion. Everything is up to you to decide. I secretly stayed at the hospital, monitoring Lu Nguyen for a week. Watching her move from the intensive care unit to the regular hospital room. Look at her refusing to eat and drinking, getting thinner and thinner. Lu Nuyen likes to eat sweets. Eggs and tomato sauce must have sugar, and the sauce of sweet and sour ribs must have double the sugar. The food in the hospital was not to her taste, so she refused to eat. Until that day, when the bowl of pork rib soup stewed with lotus root was brought, she could barely take more than a sip. However, right after that, his eyes suddenly turned cold and he suddenly raised his hand to smash the bowl of soup. Pork rib soup with lotus root is Nuyen's favorite dish. I carefully cooked for 5 hours, just hoping she could eat a little more. But unexpectedly, when she tasted that familiar flavor, Nuyen broke the bowl. Tamo So is right, now she hates everything that belongs to the past, including the lotus root stewed pork rib soup that she used to like the most, and me too. The first time I secretly entered Lu Nuyen's hospital room was early in the morning. Her medicine has a sedative ingredient, so she sleeps very deeply, but I was still afraid that she would suddenly wake up, so I wore a mask. The person lying on the bed was noticeably thinner, his eye sockets were sunken. Lips pale, without any color. Lu Nuyen was 1.7 m tall, but now only a skinny skeleton remains. The bandage wrapped around her left wrist was like a knife stabbing straight into my heart. Tears of pain could not be contained and kept falling. I reached out my hand, but then stopped in midair. It took all my courage to dare touch Nuyen. The index finger and middle finger of the right hand now have only a short length left. The cut was uneven, clearly exposing the excruciating pain she had endured. She was lying quietly in front of me, but it was as if I saw a bloody Lu Nuyen. I bit my lip to suppress my emotions, then carefully placed her hand back into the blanket. I sat next to her, quietly watching over her. Obviously, my eyes were heavy, but I still couldn't bear to close them, wanting to look at her a little more, a little more. Since meeting Lu Nuyen again, I have never had a good night's sleep. But tonight, the drowsiness came irresistibly. Maybe because she's right next to me. Falling onto the edge of the bed, holding the hem of her hospital gown, I fell into a deep sleep. Until the hospital bed made a sound, Lu Nuyen, who was sleeping peacefully, suddenly began to struggle. Her whole body trembled, her arms struggled wildly as if resisting something. Sobs rang out, as if enduring extreme pain. "I can't die, I mustn't die," in her broken words. I vaguely heard Kogan is still waiting at home to marry me. Suddenly, Lu Nuyen threw her head into the bed. I quickly hugged her, but was knocked to the ground. I crawled up, not caring about anything else, just holding her head tightly. "Lu Nuyen, it's me. Don't be afraid, I'm here. Kogan has arrived." The hand that was struggling suddenly grabbed my shirt tightly, refusing to let go. Doctors and nurses immediately rushed in. They quickly held Lu Nuyen's limbs tightly. It took a lot of strength to remove her hand from my shirt. The moment we were separated, I heard her call Kogan. The hand still desperately reached out towards me. The nurses quickly used straps to stabilize her. Then, inject a sedative. The excitement gradually subsided, but Lu Nuyen's body still twitched, her mouth moved, not knowing what she was saying. I lay down next to her, hugged her tightly, and gently comforted her. "Lu Nuyen, be good. I'm here." When we were still in love, Lu Nuyen had a stomach ache. Every time she hurts, she snuggles into my arms, wanting me to hug her tightly, wanting me to comfort her. Every once in a while, she even opens her eyes to check if I'm still there or not. I felt the person inside me gradually soften. When she was completely asleep, I gently removed the glare cord. The moment my arms were relaxed, Lu Nuyen instinctively wrapped her arms around my waist, hugged me tightly, and fell asleep. I was awakened by a nightmare. It wasn't until I saw Lu Nuyen next to me that I breathed a sigh of relief. But before his breath could completely relax, he immediately choked. Lu Nuyen has woken up. She just looked at me quietly, as if she had just woken up from a long dream. Ko gone. Before I could react, Lu Nuyen rushed forward and kissed me on the lips. At that moment, the doctor knocked on the door to check the room. The moment the door opened, Lu Nuyen suddenly woke up and looked at me in surprise. Even reached out to touch my face. When she touched the warmth on my skin, her pupils contracted strongly and then, as if she had been electrocuted, she quickly withdrew her hand. She fell onto the bed, and the cup on the nightstand also fell, making a crisp shattering sound. Glass splashed everywhere. Lu Nuyen, are you okay? I asked worriedly. Who let you in here? Go away. I slowly stood up, choking out my voice. Lu Nuyen, don't you need me anymore? Lu Nuyen looked at me for a long time without saying anything, her eyes filled with sadness. When she saw me approaching, she immediately turned and ran away. But the more she ran, the more static her steps became. Just as she was about to open the door, I hugged her tightly. I only need you, Lu Nuyen. But Lu Nuyen seemed crazy, frantically pushing me away. Let go, let go. I hugged tightly, determined not to let go. During the struggle, we both fell to the ground. Unfortunately, the place where he fell was full of broken glass. I instinctively closed my eyes tightly, but immediately felt my body being rotated. Lu Nuyen lay on her back on a pile of debris. The glass shards cut the skin and blood spilled out. But she didn't show any pain, just persistently hugged me tightly, protecting me from injury. I saw her back was covered in blood, but didn't dare touch it. I could only scream loudly, call the doctor. Lu Nuyen suddenly raised her head and grabbed my hand. Ko gone, please, let me go. Tamo So is a good person. Marry her, don't care about me anymore, okay? You and her were just married by agreement, it was fake. From beginning to end, I was always waiting for you. At that moment, I seemed to see fluctuations in Lu Nuyen's eyes. But as soon as she opened her mouth, her words pushed me into the abyss. But Ko gone, I stopped waiting for you a long time ago. Lu Nuyen's words echoed in my head, over and over, as if wanting to drown me in pain. I cried for a long time and hated her very much. Then I will never care about her again. However, at dinner time, I still go home to cook for Lu Nuyen. When carrying the lunchbox to the hospital, I thought to myself, if this time she dares to throw away my rice, I will never cook again. After giving the food to the nurse, I still didn't feel secure, so I secretly walked to the hospital room, just to see her for a moment. But when I arrived at the door, the scene inside stunned me. Tamo So was there. Lu Nuyen, can't you let go of Ko gone? He had a hard time letting go of the past, but you took advantage of his pity to cling to him. Aren't you sad? No matter how many times I have to say it, you two are no longer compatible. With a disabled body like yours, can you walk by his side for the rest of your life? Lu Nuyen's voice was filled with patience. No one wants Ko gone to be happier than me. I couldn't believe what I just saw and heard. The person who was always gentle and polite like Tamo So now seemed like a completely different person. I was angry and was about to push the door open, when I heard Tamo So shouting at Lu Nuyen, "You won't live much longer, do you still want to drag Ko gone to die with you?" Having finished speaking, Tamo So angrily left. I followed, eventually finding her in the parking lot. Now, looking at that face, I just feel like I'm really bad at looking at people. Tamo Chu, cancel the marriage. This is an announcement, not a negotiation. Unexpectedly, Tamo So burst out laughing. Cancel my engagement, what happens after that? Return to that cripple? Before I could finish my sentence, I gave her a hard slap. The force I used was very great, causing Tam Oso's face to move to one side. I don't allow you to talk about Lu Nguyen like that. Tam Oso stared at me with dangerous eyes. Ko Gan, do you really think Lu Nguyen still loves you? I know exactly what you like. Understanding his every hobby, knowing how to make him happy, it's all thanks to Yen. She no longer loved him anymore. Anyway, he was engaged to me. In her eyes, he was the one who betrayed her first. He used her. Maybe she hates you to death. I clutched Tam Oso's collar, irrepressible anger engulfing me. You're talking nonsense. It's obvious that we're just in a fake marriage. She tricked me, intentionally making Lu Yan more hurt. Tam Oso bowed his head, a trace of pain flashed in his eyes. Ko Gan, I'm not lying to you. In my heart there is really only one person. That person is you. Everything I do is for you, because I want you to completely forget about Lu Nguyen. Now she is just a waste. Why can't you look at me even once? I laughed coldly, each word, each sentence said with determination. If you dare to hurt Lu Nguyen again, I will drag you to death with me. Tam Oso looked at me stunned. Would you rather choose a waste person than be with me? Ko Gan, I've loved you so much all these years, don't you know? Don't you feel it at all? When I left the parking lot, Tam Oso burst out laughing like crazy. Crazy, everyone's gone. I always thought that she and I were the same, both pitiful people, forced by family, carrying an unattainable person in our hearts. So, when she proposed a fake marriage, I agreed to get married. Anyway, it's just a name only. If it's not Lu Nguyen, then it doesn't matter who it is. My current job is arranged by Tam Oso. I didn't want anything to do with her anymore, so I resigned. But I didn't expect her to be this vile. Every time I had a hard time finding a new job, she made it known everywhere that I had suffered from depression. Very soon after that, I was fired again and almost no company dared to hire me. In a gloomy mood, I still showed up at the hospital on time. The nurses looked at me with eyes full of sympathy. I hugged the blanket and quietly walked into the hospital room under the dim light of the night light. Lu Nguyen slept very soundly. Before, she never slept when there was light. After all, what happened to make her so afraid of the dark? Even when sleeping, he frowns restlessly. I reached out and gently stroked her frowning eyebrows. Lu Nguyen, get well soon. Before, you always said you would be by my side. But now you are so indifferent to me. There is nothing real about me and Tam Oso. Is it true that you don't have me anymore in your heart? The person lying on the bed remained unresponsive. I shook my head and sighed, slowly leaned against her, grabbed the hem of her shirt and fell asleep. But in my dream, I felt someone gently embracing me, burying their head in my crook. Not long after, a warm breath blew on my neck. A trembling voice whispered in his ear, Ko Gan, your Lu Nguyen is now a disabled person. I don't know how long I will live. I don't want to involve you, and I don't want you to pity me. The next morning when I woke up and saw Lu Nguyen still sleeping peacefully in bed, I was sure that I had had a wild dream. So he secretly kissed her, then was full of energy to look for a job. God does not disappoint. I finally found a new job. But on the first day of work, Tam Oso once again revealed that I had been depressed. As expected, I was fired again. No company dares to accept me anymore. I have pain but I can't express it. I can only sit alone on the side of the road and drink alcohol. Even though I'm deep in drunkenness, I just want to find salvation. Lu Nguyen. I knew she was sleeping, so I just dared to sit next to her and express my feelings. Lu Nguyen, when the knife cut through my arm, it was very painful, but not as painful as losing you. Why don't you understand? I just need you. No matter what you are, I want to be with you. But if you don't need me, then I really don't know how I should continue living. Gently hugged her, his voice chokingly asked, "Do you really no longer have me in your heart?" In the quiet hospital room, I heard my own voice shaking. Lu Nuyen, treat me a little better. I only have you left. That night I cried a lot, cried so much that my stomach hurt, my head hurt, my whole body hurt, and I couldn't sleep. However, the person who should have been sleeping on the bed quietly sat up. She got out of bed, walked behind me, and carefully helped me onto the bed. No wonder I slept on the chair for so long. No wonder I don't have back pain. On the other side of the concave bed, a cold hand touched me. Lu Nuyen hugged me tightly in silence, filled with heartache. You say I don't have you in my heart anymore? How can I not have you? Hearing this sentence, tears immediately welled up in my eyes. I knelt and hugged Yen, found her lips and kissed her. Recalling Lu Nuyen's reaction at that time, her ears were red and her heart was beating so hard that her chest vibrated. I couldn't help but laugh. Luckily she is no longer cold towards me like before. I gained more momentum and started taking care of her as a nurse. Lu Nuyen, brightly bringing her food. However, she didn't move a word. But when I left, she ate like a hungry tiger. Lu Nuyen still often chased me away, determined not to let me stay in the hospital overnight. But I can clearly feel things are different. Before, she started to care about me. When I left, the person standing blankly at the door of the hospital room looking in the direction of the elevator was still her. I continued to stay in the hospital, using the excuse of depression to make her feel sad. Again, I used the excuse of sleepwalking to climb into bed. She crawled under the blanket and pretended to fall asleep. Taking this opportunity, I hugged Yen tightly in my arms, wrapping her legs around her like a bear. Quailed all over, but Yen was as stiff as a piece of wood. Touched the protruding bones on her body. I couldn't help but wonder, I take such good care of you, but why don't you gain any weight? After a few days of patience, Yen finally spoke up, "Aren't you going to work?" I answered while peeling the apple, not bothering to raise my head, "My job is to take care of you, nothing is more important than you." After speaking, I even intentionally winked a few times, but she cruelly ignored me. I don't know if it was because of me or not, but Lu Nuyen started active treatment. She takes her medicine on time and receives treatment on time. Even went out to sunbathe. Even though I was tricked, I lied and said I was hit by a car, but within a few seconds I saw Yen running down from the upper floor in such panic that she even dropped a shoe. Seeing me safe and sound, her eyes suddenly turned red. It seemed Lu Nuyen would run to hug me. But no, she just glared aggressively and turned around to leave. For a long time, she didn't even talk to me anymore. Initially, Lu Nuyen's health and spirit were very bad. But thanks to a month of dedicated care, her mood became much more stable, but her body was still pitifully weak. On Nuyen's birthday, I successfully got her out of the hospital. She was really too thin, her clothes were baggy, and as soon as the cold wind passed by, she coughed non-stop. The bouquet was clearly chosen by Nuyen herself because her mother liked these flowers, and she also fully prepared the white wine that her uncle liked to drink. Lu Nuyen's parents could not bear the shock when she passed away and passed away one after another. They only had one daughter, Lu Nuyen, so I endured the pain and took the name of my son to take care of the funeral for the two of them. I chose a place on the mountainside to bury Lu Nuyen's parents. That place has the most beautiful scenery. When climbing up, Lu Nuyen was panting. Looking at the photo on the tombstone, her whole body seemed to freeze, not moving for a long time. She knelt on the ground, used her fingers that were no longer intact, to caress the photo. The voice was mixed with sobs so soft that it was impossible to hear clearly. I tilted my head and sighed, letting her have her own space with her parents, then quietly walked down the stairs to a place not far away. It was a grave without a body. On the stele is a photo of a young couple, young man and woman. Below the photo are engraved 2 lines of words, Lu Nguyen, Ko Gan. From the day Lu Nguyen passed away, I also died. When footsteps sounded from behind, I sat for a long time. Lu Nguyen's voice seemed to echo from a faraway place, sad and heavy. Thank you. I didn't turn around, I just continued to clean the tombstone. There's no need to say these words between us, in my heart they are my parents. The person behind suddenly became silent, leaving only increasingly heavy breathing. She walked a few quick steps, stared at the photo on the tombstone, then turned to me with eyes of disbelief. I gently said, "This place faces the sun, the sunlight shines on it all day long. You will definitely like this place, but I also like this place. So what should we do now? I guess we'll have to squeeze in a bit." Ko Gan, Nguyen's body trembled, her voice was hoarse due to dehydration. I raised my hand to wipe her tears, trying to smile. "Lu Nguyen, let's go home." When returning to the apartment complex, Lu Nguyen suddenly stopped walking. I smiled and pulled her sleeve. "What's wrong? Even your own family won't accept it?" She shook her head, her eyelashes drooping. "This is our wedding house. This house was bought by Lu Nguyen's family, but is only in my name. Every decoration in the house is according to my preferences, even the bed sheet is my favorite red color. After Nguyen passed away, I didn't dare step into this place for 3 years. The chocolate bar, she had finished eating, was still on the table. Out on the balcony, our couple's pajamas were still hanging out to dry. Every time I walked in, I felt like she had never left, as if she had only been out for a moment. But when I walked out the door, I was pulled back to reality, forced to face painful loss. When the door opened, Lu Nguyen's eyes strongly scanned everything in the room. Everything remains the same as before, even the red lettering on the window is still there. But she was so naked that she didn't dare enter. I stood in the room, holding out my hand. "Lu Nguyen, you're home." Her cold hands held mine. Finally, I was able to bring Lu Nguyen back home. Nguyen sat on the sofa stiffly, like a strange guest. I laughed, pulled her into the kitchen, and asked to eat the stir-fried potatoes and loofah soup she cooked herself. Lu Nguyen glanced at the kitchen, quietly rolled up her sleeves and opened the refrigerator. I went back to my room alone and rearranged everything. When Nguyen knocked on the door and called me out for dinner, I had just finished preparing everything. But when I looked back at the room, I suddenly felt strangely strange. I pushed Lu Nguyen into the bedroom, like entering my own wedding hall, tense but solemn. I took each step carefully, bowed my head, and looked straight at her intently. Lu Nguyen stared at every corner of the room, her eyes slightly relaxed. "Lu Nguyen, are you willing to marry Ko Gan?" Lu Nguyen avoided my gaze and spoke. "Ko Gan, you..." I spread my arms wide. "Lu Nguyen, look at me. Am I still human? Before I met you again, I was just a soulless body, living a desolate day-to-day. Do you think that leaving me without involving me is the best thing for me? Without you, I will die." Tears came out of my eyes, my voice was hoarse. "Lu Nguyen, without you I cannot live." Lu Nguyen's eyes were red, staring at me. I vigorously wiped away my tears, my voice firm. "Lu Nguyen, I just ask you one last time, do you really not want to marry me?" The room only had the sound of the wind passing through. I gritted my teeth and emphasized my voice, but still couldn't hide my choking. I asked again. Do you really want it? Do you even want it in your dreams? Lu Nuyen almost screamed, her whole body trembling. I cried and laughed at the same time, tears flowing non-stop. Gently hug her. I also want to marry you, in my dreams too. Emotions that have been suppressed for many years finally burst out. Lu Nuyen looked at me with red eyes and helplessly. You are so stupid. Kogan, I smiled and held her hand tightly. I'm not stupid. Lu Nuyen, life is impermanent. When you love, you have to embrace it right away, remember? By the first snow that falls. The late wedding after 5 years was finally held. I thought there wouldn't be many guests, but I didn't expect all the friends and relatives we invited that year to come. They sincerely blessed me and Lu Nuyen. The wedding was not big, but every detail was arranged by Nuyen herself. Red theme, beautiful balloons, loads of star-shaped lights. Everything is exactly the same as that year. The moment I entered the banquet hall, I felt like I returned to the wedding of that year. I walked step by step on the flower-covered path, held Nuyen's hand, and walked with her through the flower path, in the presence of close friends. The flower road is very short, but it took us 5 years to complete it. When reading the vows, Lu Nuyen saw that the flower on my chest was slightly askew. Just as I was about to reach out to fix it, I suddenly leaned down and kissed her on the lips. The friends below stood stunned for a second, then burst into laughter. Kogan, what are you in such a hurry for? I laughed loudly in response. What do you guys know? My wife likes to be kissed by me. After saying that, I deliberately kissed her a few more times in front of everyone. Nuyen also looked at me with eyes filled with love. Looking at her current appearance, I really feel that the old Lu Nuyen has returned. Still extravagant, still proud, still loving me to the core. After getting married, we made many plans: raise a cat, buy a small car, try to go on a honeymoon before turning 30, and make sure to walk 100 steps every day after eating, striving to live to 99 years old. But my Lu Nuyen, even at the age of 30, you can't reach it. Even though you've tried treatment and practiced persistently, it's all in vain. Her body had long been worn away, hers was like a bow stretched to its limit. The doctor said she could only live 1 year, but she pushed herself to 2 years just because she wanted to be with me a little longer. I know Nuyen doesn't want to leave, because she can't bear to leave me alone, but having to endure that torment, she's really tired. I hugged her like always, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. It's okay, Lu Nuyen is really okay. He has no regrets anymore. With her body exhausted, Nuyen used her last strength to put an end to her life. She passed away in my arms. Her final blessings were exactly the same as in her will. Very lucky that we were able to accompany each other on this journey of life. Don't cry, don't be heartbroken. Hopefully in the next life we can love until the end of our lives. Aside from that, when I heard the news of Lu Nuyen's death, I was not surprised. After all, with her physical condition, being able to persevere for 2 years was already extraordinary. The only thing I'm worried about is whether Kogan can endure it. In college, Lu Nuyen and I were friends. We both had the same interests, even the boy we liked was the same. But Kogan firmly chose her. From that moment, the seed of jealousy was planted in my heart. Later, when I heard the news of her death, besides being heartbroken, I felt a little relieved. I took the name of Lu Nuyen's close friend and helped Kogan solve many problems, but in return he only gave me appreciation, no other feelings. I always thought that if I persevered long enough, I would definitely make Kogan's heart move. But right now, Lu Nuyen has returned from the dead. It was I who told Nguyen how Kogan was living peacefully now, lighting up hope in her heart. But he deliberately used past stories to stimulate her, driving her crazy. Then, little by little, remind her of her current body condition so that she understands that she is just a useless person. Even if she returned alive, there was no longer any possibility between her and Kogan. My plan was very successful. I see Lu Nguyen living every day in the torn line between loving and not daring to love, like a divided madman, who can only rely on self-destruction to numb the pain. When I told Lu Nguyen that Kogan and I were engaged, she committed suicide in the hospital. Unfortunately, she was saved, but it's okay. I still have many ways to make Nguyen's life worse than death. After tricking Kogan into getting engaged to me, I knew the opportunity was ripe, so I deliberately arranged for him to meet Lu Nguyen again. So, that day, I deliberately asked him to get medicine for me, intentionally letting him see Lu Nguyen. If Kogan just looked at me for a moment, I wouldn't do such a stupid thing. After that, everything happened exactly as I predicted. Kogan's appearance was the last straw. No one wants the person they love to see them in such a pathetic state. Lu Nguyen went crazy, and Kogan was so heartbroken that he couldn't bear it. Everything is going according to my plan. After being heartbroken, you feel tired and depressed. No matter how much Kogan loves Lu Nguyen, can that love withstand the erosion of 5 years of separation? Unable to accept the fact that the person he loves is now just an invalid. No, Lu Nguyen was tormented by illness and no longer had any human appearance. With that appearance, how can she fight with me? Furthermore, I know Lu Nguyen will definitely continuously push Kogan away, because she really loves him. But what I didn't expect was that Kogan's feelings for her not only did not decrease, but also became deeper. Even though Lu Nguyen won't live much longer, even though the person in his heart has now become a weak, faint person living in the dark, he still accepts everything and still loves as deeply as the first day. Unable to bear it anymore, I scolded Lu Nguyen for being selfish and cowardly, but Kogan discovered it. He bluntly canceled his engagement with me. But I'm not worried, because I know Lu Nguyen won't live much longer. One day, Kogan will still return to me. So, I left them alone for a while, but I didn't expect them to get married. I didn't expect that they lived so happily that it made me jealous. After Lu Nguyen died, I thought that if I just did the same as before, I would be able to make Kogan return to my side. I just didn't expect him to follow Lu Nguyen. Every year the shyest guy uses the most tragic way to be with the person he loves forever. Thank you for watching the video. If there is any good story that hasn't been posted yet, you can comment below to let me know.